This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Welcome to the Parent Footprint Podcast with Dr. Dan. I am Dr. Dan, your host for the show. Let me tell you a little bit about Parent Footprint. At Parent Footprint, we believe the key to raising happy, healthy, and engaged children is for parents to be happy, healthy, and engaged themselves. There is a key here. A key is awareness. We believe awareness is the foundation to create your vision of successful parenting, and with increased awareness and intention, we can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint on our children. Today's show is called Neurodiversity with Dr. Devon, and I'm so excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Devon MacEachron, to you. Devon, first, before I say nice things about you, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. It's really exciting to be here.
So Dr. Devon earned her bachelor's from Amherst College, and the exciting thing about this is that she graduated in the first class of admitted women. She then went on to get her MBA at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and then went on to get her PhD in school psychology from UC Berkeley. Devon has lived all over the world and has rich experiences. More recently, on the East Coast in New York, she has a practice where she provides educational planning and psychoeducational assessment for families, for kids and families of bright learners seeking to optimize learning and achievement. Her mission is to strategically help position students to achieve their goals and dreams, and for parents to feel confident that they are doing the best for their children in ways that will make a real difference in their child's life for years to come. Love that goal. So aligned with that goal.
Terrific.
Okay. There's something that everyone needs to know, and that is, in our intro to talking about neurodiversity, that you did this talk, this video, and it ended up with more than 29 million views. Was that expected?
Absolutely not. If I had expected that to happen, I probably would have at least blown dry my hair properly that morning. So tell everyone what this thing was and how it came to be, how it just sort of evolved. Okay, well, it was somewhat serendipitous. The concept of neurodiversity has always appealed to me, and we can get into that more later. But I have two children who are neurodiverse. My daughter is a journalist and producer at Now This News, which is an online media company. And it was Mental Health Awareness Month. And she said, "Mom, you're a psychologist, can you come give a talk on something having to do with mental health?" And so I decided to do it on neurodiversity and went down to their studio and put together this piece. It's an opinion piece. And the response to it was really surprising to both me and to Now This, because usually videos about science topics and about things of this nature don't tend to go viral in the way that this one did.
And it just blew up. And the conversation of neurodiversity, which has been bubbling and picking up steam for a long time, it seems to be, as we were talking earlier, getting momentum, particularly as our world is being shaped by many neurodiverse people.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I'd like to just, before we talk about that, if I could just kind of give credit where credit is due, that the term neurodiversity has been around since the 1990s and really came originally out of two places. The autism community, a sociologist and advocate in Australia who coined the term in a paper, and then also a journalist who wrote a really interesting article for Atlantic Magazine based on what was going on in Silicon Valley. And he said that neurodiversity is sort of it represents the ascendancy of geekdom, that geeks might inherit the earth, if you will, because they have neurodiversity that enables them to think differently. And it might be better wiring for some of the demands in places like high tech, which is pretty exciting.
And so we keep using the term neurodiversity. What does that term mean?
Okay, well, because it's a new concept and word, it's only about 20 years old. The definition is still evolving. But in my mind, one good way to approach it is that with typical diversity categories we're all familiar with are, race and gender identity and expression, socioeconomic status, religion, etc. But if we broaden the concept of diversity to include neurological differences, then we're speaking of neurodiversity. And Wikipedia has a pretty good definition. They say that neurodiversity is the idea that atypical neurological development is a normal human difference, and that it's to be recognized and respected as any other human variation. And I like that definition.
Mm-hmm. And so what does this mean practically? Practically, if we are open to neurodiversity and we are accepting and respecting these differences just as all of the other domains that you had mentioned, what does that look like?
It really, I think it depends on the individual. When we're talking about children and parents, it involves parenting as well as the child's needs. But when we're talking about adults, I think neurodiversity really gives credibility and agency to people to make up their own mind about how they want to view their brain wiring. Do they want to define themselves as an autistic person or a person with autism? That's their decision. It shouldn't be imposed by outsiders, doctors, or others. It's sort of a self-determination approach. When it comes to parenting, how it looks is a little bit different because parents need to make decisions for their children about whether they're going to try to fix challenge areas and problems that there might appear in a neurodiverse individual who has, say, ADHD or autism or dyslexia, or if they're going to not and sort of accept the child as they are and emphasize the strengths. I'm getting into a lot of topics all at once here. I hope I'm not getting this bogged down.
No, it's exactly where we need to go, and that is
okay.
This issue of focusing on weaknesses and pathology, what's wrong with you, or what we spend a lot of time both doing in our work lives is highlighting strengths and focusing on what's right.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, I think that's why this video and this concept is one reason why it's getting a lot of traction, is that for so many years, the medical model of disability has really been the dominant way of looking at people with neurological differences. Most of us have been trained in that model. It is really, in effect, a deficit model. It's let's look at what's wrong. Let's look at the disabilities and the disorders and diagnose them, and then focus our attention on fixing what's broken. Whereas looking at it through more of a neurodiversity lens helps us to look at the strengths and the positives that can come along with being different, and not just focus all our attention on what's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's fixing, which we're going to go back to because there is such thing as intervention and accommodation, which we want parents to know about. And there is focusing on strengths, which we can highlight too. But before we move on to that, I just want to mention a word that you said not that long ago, which is acceptance. And I think this is a big one in terms of when we have neurodiverse children or neurodiverse family members or coworkers. What do you think about where acceptance fits in all of this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important at the parent level, the child level, and the societal level. And I'll start with the child because they're the critical focus. I think it's really important for a child to understand how their brain works, to understand that it's not fixed and that things can be improved, but that also there is often a unique way of thinking that's pretty fun and nice. I mean, who would want to be, typical if they could be, atypical is much more interesting. And for children at really almost any age, I've talked to 6 or 7-year-olds about brain differences and strengths and challenges of being wired differently, and they get it. If it's not explained to them, often they think there's something wrong and they don't know what it is. But if it's explained that there's difference, and some challenges come out of that and some advantages come out of it too, and accepting themselves and embracing themselves as they are. And that doesn't mean as they are without growing. It means as they can be and want to be based on where they are. And then for parents, I think it can be a difficult thing for parents too, because most of us expect when we decide to become parents that it'll be an easier ride than it often ends up being if we have an atypically wired child. And it takes a while sometimes to accept that, okay, this is a different path than we planned on, but it has its great benefits and advantages as well, and to take it on and embrace it. At a societal level, I think this is key as well in terms of companies employing neurodiverse individuals and making it a comfortable environment for them and utilizing their strengths while trying to work around areas of challenge. So it's really at all levels. I've never quite understood why there should be any shame or embarrassment in having any sort of psychological difference. To me, it's no different than any other kind of difference, and individual differences are really, really beautiful. And I hope that in the psychological realm, we're starting to shift toward there being less stigma and more acceptance.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
And as a parent, knowing us knowing a little bit about each other's kids, we both know that we've had to, over the years, there is this change from, wait, this is how I thought it was supposed to be, to it's not like that. Just really to acknowledge in some respects, there is a grieving process, or that might be too strong for some people, but it's not for others. A grieving process of, wait, we're not going on the regular path all the time. There's differences. And with those differences, there's pain, there's sadness, there's struggle, which of course is an inevitable part of life, but we don't plan on that being the case for our kids in their earlier years when they're supposed to, quote, or we think they're going to fit in.
Absolutely. And I found, I also thought of it in the same terms that you described with the multiple stages of grief. That people often go through when they find out they have an illness, denial, the various stages. I can't remember the order of the 5, but the last one being acceptance and the first being denial. There's anger in there too. I certainly went through all those stages as a parent when I was first finding out what was going on with my children. There's a book that I've discovered relatively recently that addresses this so nicely called Not What I Expected. I don't know if you've seen that one before. It's by Rita Eichenstein. She's a psychologist in Southern California, and it's perfect. It explains so nicely for parents how to work through the stages when you're first finding out that your child is different and what you're going to do about it.
And then when we get to this place of acceptance as parents, you mentioned how important it is to help a neurodiverse child understand who they are, how they tick, what their profile is, so they can put it in the right boxes as opposed to, as you pointed out, being deficient. Something's wrong with me. I'm not smart. Because when we put form around the differences, there's also some cool differences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think I'm not sure how most people do it. What I do when I do an assessment with a child is I give feedback to the parents, and then separately I have a meeting on another day with the child, and I demystify their learning for them. And I give them a summary, a colorful 1-page summary describing their brain as of that date. Because it can grow and it can change, so it's not fixed. And telling them I describe them as superpowers, what their superpowers are, their strengths, and then where there's a couple of areas of challenge and what can be done to improve or work around those. And it's empowering
Yes.
to know about yourself and to be able to decide, hey, I don't care that I can't spell. That's okay. It's not important to me, but I do care that I can do math, or that I can have conversations with my peers. Whatever the challenges are, it's very individual what matters to people and what doesn't.
Absolutely. And yes, we do a very similar thing with a bell curve and strengths and challenges. And I always find it remarkable. What I like to do is have kids guess at times, like, hey, remember we did this. Where do you think you fell? And and as you and I spend a lot of time with bright kiddos, it's fascinating to me about how many of these bright individuals don't think they're bright because of their weakness areas. And it all comes funneled on the, right, I'm a poor speller, you can't read my handwriting, and their strengths often are negated to them. Yeah, I'm okay here. And then you show them these powers, these superpowers, and they light up. Of course, there's the perfectionists and we got to be really careful that sometimes the kids only focus on the one or two weaknesses instead of on all the strengths. And I think we have to be aware of that too for those folks.
Mm-hmm. And what you and I know about twice exceptional learners is that emphasizing their strengths is usually more important in the long run than dwelling on their weaknesses. Absolutely.
And for those of you out there who have not heard that term, the twice exceptional verbiage means, if you think of a bell curve, and it's people who are on the advanced side with their thinking, some of their academics, their visual, spatial, performing arts, creativity. They have very advanced skills on the one end, and on the other end, they also have a legitimate challenge, difference, disability, such as a dyslexia, ADHD, autistic spectrum, anything that gets in the way and causes challenge. So we do talk about strengths a lot and focusing on strengths. And then there's this conversation of how much do we focus on the weakness and intervene the weakness and accommodate the weakness, and how much do we focus on the strength, passion, and just engagement.
Yeah, and that's where I got some really interesting feedback on the neurodiversity video, because some people, and it's dominant in certain communities more than others, but some people don't think you should try to fix, if you will, or remediate anything in anyone. So they will be against any form of therapy, or they think that neurodiversity means that people should be totally just accepted as they are, and you shouldn't do anything to try to improve strengths or help the person adapt in any way to society. I mean, it's a tricky issue, but I don't think it's terribly tricky if one lets people decide for themselves. If there's self-determination, people can decide they want to try to get better at something, or they can decide they don't. They want to accept themselves the way they are. I think it's when we're imposing it on people that it becomes trickier. And as parents, we have to make those decisions for our children. Do we do ABA therapy for our child with autism or not? I mean, some of it's a little easier. I mean, most people would feel pretty comfortable about doing dyslexia remediation for dyslexia, but it gets stickier in the behavioral areas. Do we medicate for ADHD or not? These are difficult questions for many families.
Definitely. And there is no right answer. I think that's what everyone needs to, we'd like everyone to hear. There's no right answer. It is a personal decision, and often a decision that's based on the reality of the situation. So people who are homeschooling or at progressive schools or alternative schools often have quite a bit more leeway and room for neurodiversity and acceptance than kids who happen to be in more traditional, restrictive educational settings, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I have a family right now I'm working with who's considering a move from one community to another. And the area they're going to move to is 80% high tech. And the reason they're moving there is simply because they think there will be more neurodiverse people there, therefore more acceptance of their children's unique wiring. I mean, different environments have totally different levels of acceptance and support that are provided, and the child is really the interaction. I think this is so important of the child, the individual, and the environment they're in. You can take a child who seems like they have ADHD at an extreme level and move them from one environment to another, and the ADHD may not be apparent at all, or it may be much reduced.
Right.
So it's a lot of factors, and I appreciate what you're saying about some people don't have the flexibility to change the environment as readily.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so we're talking about we're beginning to talk about intervention medicine, dyslexia intervention, ABA therapy. And so one of the things that I love that you started doing is your blog, where you're challenging neuromyths. And so those of you who are going to get more familiar with Dr. Devon's work, she is a very bright individual who does her research, and as a result, you're able to be very provocative in the sense of taking on what you have framed neuromyths in, where there are lots of things that are out there for parents to try, and particularly what you and I feel protective about is parents who are feeling desperate because they've gone from one professional to another, one school situation to another, one doctor to another, and, quote, nothing's working or helping. And so then there's all of this marketing and these different ways of helping, healing, curing your child, which you have something to say about that.
Yeah. I think I got interested in this topic partly from some of the mistakes I made as a parent. I got my PhD when my kids were already diagnosed. So I was driven to the PhD by frustrations in raising my own children and not getting them the help they needed. But before I was knowledgeable about these topics, we did a lot of therapies that were just nonsense, didn't do any good, spent a lot of time, effort, money, and wasted time and years in pursuing therapies that had no scientific support or base for them. And that's what I want to try to help other parents avoid.
So are there any that you have your series, which later will tell people how they can get to access your series of blogs on challenging neuromyths. Are there any particular ones that you'd like to highlight now, which you hear about the most?
Yeah. And I always feel badly, poking, attacking companies, but Brain Balance is definitely up there. It really preys on parents' fears, and it makes what they do sound very scientific and very, very supported by neuroscience, when it in fact is not. And the claims they make, anything that makes big claims, like we can cure your child's ADHD, autism, or dyslexia by, having them jump on trampolines or brush them. Anything that I'm not articulating well because I'm trying to lump too many big things in the same category, but don't believe it if it sounds too good. And don't believe it if it seems to be wrapped in neuroscience, because that's often a marketing ploy. If somebody stands to gain financially by your pursuing what they say. Also, I think there is a place for vision therapy. Most of us would acknowledge that vision therapy is not generally a cure for dyslexia. That the best approach in most cases with dyslexia is phonologically based reading tutoring and remediation. Not to say that vision therapy should never be done, but as a cure, that's an overstatement. Essential oils as a cure for various things like ADHD. I could go on. I mean, anyone that anyone finds that seems questionable, I'm happy to delve into it. I personally went down the path with 4 different therapies that are not supported by the evidence. It's hard for parents though, because how are you supposed to know?
Right, and you do talk about brain scans as well, which is that's a hot topic in our field as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I went down that one. I went to the Amen clinics and had my son. I actually stopped right before he was scanned because something didn't feel right to me. But that's another one that if you were to poll people who are reputable, they'll all say the science is not there yet. The claims that are being made are inaccurate. And it does take time and effort for parents to try to uncover what's really true or not. But there are sources of information. There's, the What Works Clearinghouse. If you find a good psychologist who can tell you which therapies are valid and which ones aren't. There are a couple of other blogs out there. There's a funny one from the UK called Neurobolics. There's another woman in the US who writes about these topics. I think I was mostly inspired, the mistakes I made, but also by the current climate, both politically with fake facts and then also with just people being more, with the internet, people getting fed news that they already believe in and that already fits their views. We don't tend to question quite as much, I think, as we might have when we were being presented with ideas that didn't necessarily fit with our already decided upon framework. So it's all becoming more and more of a problem than it ever was.
Mm-hmm. I want to loop back to vision therapy for a moment, because anyone who's come into contact with our center knows that we feel positive about looking in that direction and intervention when there are indicators. And also I want to highlight that there is a lot of pushback from the field of vision therapy, particularly by ophthalmologists and others who seem to be very strongly against it. And I know that you and I are very aligned with our colleagues, Dr. Brock and Fernette Eide, and all the work they've done in dyslexia. So I just want to say this for clarification and then tell me what you think, is nothing cures dyslexia. You have dyslexia. I will always have dyslexia. Yes. However, people who have visual processing issues, which are assessed and deemed to be there, can benefit from improved visual tracking and processing as part of an overall package of multisensory intervention for dyslexia. Would you agree with that, or would you modify that?
I would probably put the package. I would agree with it, yes, but too many people don't do the package you described at the end. They stop at vision therapy.
Correct.
And I've seen that quite often, where they just don't engage in the actual reading tutoring, if you will.
Right.
It's all about the eyes, and the eyes are only one piece of the process. There's sounds and memory and so much else going on, rapid naming. But yeah, no, I think there's a part. I think it's a part I probably refer maybe a bit less often than you do for vision therapy. It's not as common out here in the East Coast as it seems to be in California. But I definitely have sent people. And I think it can be an important piece.
Okay, so what do you recommend for parents of neurodiverse children?
That's a pretty broad question.
Yes. So if we're bringing this thing down, we're getting close. We're getting closer to the parent footprint moment question. What would you say? I'll pare it down a little bit. If you top 3 recommendations for parents of neurodiverse children.
Okay. Number one, understand your child. And by understand, I mean, don't just mean the weaknesses or deficits or disabilities. I mean the strengths and interests as well, so that you can focus on all aspects of their development. Number two, build their self-esteem and agency, so that they feel good about themselves and believe in themselves, and you believe in them. And then number three, I would say, would be to emphasize the strengths piece, along with addressing the challenges, and perhaps even put an emphasis on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that concise enough?
That was really concise. You pulled that together nicely.
All right.
So I'm just going to reiterate that, because that you just distilled a lot of information for people to take with them today. So understand your child. That includes their entire profile, not just their deficits. Build their self-esteem, their agency, their belief in themselves, their confidence, and then emphasize the strengths while also considering the challenges.
Yes, thank you.
Nice. Okay. All right, Devon, it is that time for the parent footprint moment question. And here it is. Tell us about a time when you became aware of yourself as an individual or a parent, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your child.
Okay, so I started out trying to fix what was wrong with my kids and getting them all the therapies we could possibly find and address. I think for me, a moment happened when my daughter had practiced a great deal for a concert. She played clarinet. I think she was in 4th grade. And she has ADHD and dyslexia. She went up on the stage. There were maybe 500 people from her school in the audience, and she's rifling through her papers. Papers are flying on the floor. Everybody's waiting. And she starts to look concerned, and the clock is ticking. And finally, she gets this big smile on her face and says, well, I was going to play whatever, but I forgot my music sheet. So instead, I'm going to play If I Only Had a Brain. And the entire audience just started cracking up, and I turned red and was mortified that she'd forgotten things. After the concert, the person in front of me turned around and said, oh, your daughter did a great job. She really recovered quickly. And I said, oh, but she practiced that piece so hard. I was so embarrassed and upset for her that she didn't find it. And he said, well, wouldn't you rather have a child that can think on her feet and be creative and resilient than one who's got her papers organized? And that was a big aha moment for me. Made me step back and say, hey, wait a minute. It's not about being orderly and organized. It's about embracing create the strengths that my daughter does have, your children have, the things that they can do rather than the things they can't do. And that was the moment where I decided to shift from worrying as much about weaknesses to being more about enrichment and strengths. And I decided to take on the role of dean of enrichment in the family and focus on the fun stuff and the good stuff. And that was a big shift.
That is a great story. Dean of enrichment. That sounds much more fun than the dean of curriculum or corrective actions or whatever else it is.
And plus, it makes your relationship with your child that much closer.
Yes.
More
so
fun.
Everyone out there with your kids, with their messy rooms, their disorganized binders, their trail across the house so you can always see where they've been, let's reshift to the strength profile and how they might be able to go with the flow, think on their feet, and maybe even make people laugh. Mm-hmm. That's a great story, Devon. Thank you. Okay, Devon, so you continue to produce lots of interesting works based on related to neurodiversity. So tell everyone where they can continue to follow you.
Oh, the best thing to do would be to go to my website, which is www.drdevon.com, and it's Devon, Devon.com. Or if you just Google my name, Devon MacEachron, it pretty much pops right up. And you can sign up for my blog there. That's probably a good way to get, you get notifications as new blogs come out. Another way would be on Facebook or Twitter. On Facebook, do you call it your handle? I don't know what you call it.
I think it's something like that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, mine is the @ and then 2E gifted. just the number 2 and then E Gifted, both under Twitter and Facebook. Or again, put my name in and Facebook friend me, and I'll accept that. And then I'm active on a number of different Facebook groups and various listservs, participating in the dialogue about how to help kids.
And you guys will all notice that she is cited and linked to quite a lot these days because of the work she's doing. Dr. Devon, thank you so much for this conversation. I always enjoy talking with you.
Same here, Dan. It's great to talk with you.
So everyone, heed the words of wisdom from Dr. Devon. Understand your child. Work on their self-esteem, their agency, their belief in themselves and their confidence. Emphasize their strengths while also considering how to support the challenges. As always, we want you to check us out at www.parentfootprint.com. You know we have the Parent Footprint Awareness Training, which is designed to be an interactive, individualized format to help you be the parent that you want to be. Try to be the person on a daily basis that you want your child to become. They are always watching. And as always, ask yourself the question I ask myself every day. What footprint do you want to leave?